Tonight we step straight into the soot-choked heart of a Tudor kitchen, through a narrow archway, into a world where fire is God, meat is currency, and the air itself seems to sear your lungs. You're not just visiting, you're dropped right into the deep end, shoes scraping against wet stone as smoke coils up in your nose and eyes. The floor's slippery with something you hope is just spilled ale. The ceiling is lost somewhere above, veiled in the greasy mist of roasting animal fat and singed herbs. Welcome to your new job. Before we get too cozy, remember, you probably won't survive this. The men and women who work in these kitchens are hardened by heat, wielding cleavers and sarcasm with equal skill. You just slipped on a marrow bone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle deeper in, tugging your borrowed apron over your nose like a smoke mask. It doesn't help. The fires are roaring, not one hearth, but many, positioned along the stone walls like gaping red mouths. Someone's turning a pig on a spit, its skin bubbling and crackling in a way that's both hypnotic and deeply unsettling. Another pot boils ominously, belching steam that smells like onions, blood, and regret. Your eyes sting. A man with arms like hams barks something at you, probably an order, but you can't make it out over the clang of ladles and the crackle of wood. His face is streaked in soot. Everyone's is. Even the teenage girl peeling turnips has war paint of grime. The scale hits you. This isn't a kitchen, it's a battlefield, and you've shown up without armor. Fact. Tudor kitchens in royal or noble households weren't quaint hearthside nooks. At Hampton Court, Henry VIII's kitchen alone employed over 200 staff. 200 people, each with a specific duty: boiling, roasting, spicing, slicing, cleaning, baking, brewing, yelling. And every single one of them somehow manages to look more competent than you. A boy no older than 13 elbows past you, dragging a sack of flour that looks twice his size. His face is ghost white with dust, and he offers you a smug look that says, "You're not going to last till sundown." And he's probably right. Let's talk heat. It's not warm in here, it's infernal. The kind of oppressive, soul-melting heat that sticks to your skin like syrup. There's no ventilation except the occasional arched window cracked for light, not airflow. You feel your hair sticking to your neck already. The only relief? Standing near the storage room, which smells of mold and pickles but at least doesn't roast you alive. "Move," someone shouts, and you sidestep just in time to avoid being splashed by a pot of boiling something, maybe broth, maybe punishment. A splash lands near your foot, sizzling on the stone floor. You begin to suspect your entire job might just be dodging death in creative kitchen-themed ways. Your first task? Not culinary. Not even helpful. They hand you a bucket and point to a puddle beneath a dripping hunk of meat that's been hanging far too long. It's leaking some fluid. That's your problem now. You approach it like a hostage negotiator. Quirky tidbit for you. Tudor kitchens sometimes used hanging herbs not just for cooking, but as makeshift air fresheners. Rosemary, lavender, and mint hung in doorways to mask the scent of all this funk. Doesn't really work when the main odor is dead cow and heat. You mop, if you can call it that, until someone yells, "Watch the rats." You look down, yes, rats, plural, scuttling like they own the place. One of them pauses to sniff your boot. You both silently agree not to engage. By mid-morning, your eyes have adjusted, sort of. You can see better now, but that means seeing more. The long wooden counters where meat is flayed with something between skill and savagery. The baskets of live hens awaiting their fate. The metal spits turned by tired boys whose only break is when someone accidentally burns themselves, causing a brief, fiery commotion. Historians still argue whether the average Tudor kitchen was more chaotic or more organized than it seems. Some records suggest tight hierarchies and rigid roles. Others hint that it was controlled chaos at best, a living, breathing organism of barely managed calamity. You start to notice patterns. The youngest children fetch water and wood, the teens peel, mash, and sweat, adults command fires and knives, everyone yells, and no one, absolutely no one, stops moving. A bell rings. Not for lunch, for more work. You blink at the thought of lunch, your stomach rumbling, only to realize that whatever's being prepared probably isn't for you. You're still the new one, the outsider. You're lucky if someone tosses you a crust of bread that hasn't been stepped on. As you slump against a wooden post to catch your breath, someone walks by and mutters, "Don't lean there." You ask why. They smirk. That's where the dog sleeps. Yes, the kitchen has a dog. No, it doesn't chase rats. It lounges like royalty near the meat scraps and somehow gets more rest than you. Welcome to the bottom rung. And still, this is only the beginning. You're not sure how long you've been here. Maybe an hour, maybe a lifetime. But now you're being marched toward the hearth like some sacrificial side dish. The heat intensifies with every step. It clings to your clothes, it slides down your back, it licks at your calves through the soles of your shoes. You blink and feel your lashes stick together with sweat. A pot hisses beside you, and someone dumps a log onto a fire that crackles like it's laughing at you. And here comes your new job, feeding the fire. Always. Because the Tudor kitchen flame, it never dies. It is sacred, temperamental, and utterly relentless. The head fire boy gives you the nod. He's about 8, already has 2 missing teeth and arms like boiled sausages. You pick up a log with both hands, nearly overbalancing backward as you try to heave it onto the glowing embers. You miss. It bounces, sparks fly, someone swears. It's fine. Everything is fine. Fun fact, the main roasting hearths in a Tudor palace kitchen could be up to 10 feet wide and several feet deep. Some used mechanical spit turners, powered by dogs running in hamster-style wheels, a canine treadmill for meat. You glance around hopefully, no wheel in sight, just a crank, and a very large pig that someone expects you to rotate. You grasp the iron handle and begin to turn. It resists. You lean in. It groans. You sweat harder. Someone claps sarcastically as you grunt like you're summoning a demon. The pig, half-cooked, sizzles and spits fat at your face. The fire roars louder, and suddenly you're wondering if eyebrows are optional. Oh, and speaking of fires, there are 5 going right now. Some are used for boiling, others for roasting or baking, and one, you're told, is just for keeping ale warm. You can't help but wonder if this entire setup is secretly an elaborate punishment for petty crimes. Maybe this is hell, and you once kicked a goose. Another boy arrives with a tray of skewered quails. He's smiling for some reason. Your turn to baste. You take the brush, more like a bundle of herbs tied with twine, and step up to the meat. The smell hits you. Rosemary, smoke, fat. Not bad, if you weren't already halfway to heat stroke. You lean in, brushing oil over the bird's skin. A pop of grease lands on your forearm. You say nothing, but your inner voice screams. Quirky tidbit. Basting brushes back then were often bundles of thyme or sage, which flavored the meat as well as added a sort of natural antiseptic. You don't care. You're just trying not to cry as you catch another spit of oil right on your cheek. Suddenly, a commotion to your left. A goose has escaped its twine restraints and is flapping madly across the kitchen, honking like it's swearing vengeance. A group of staff gives lazy chase, but no one stops what they're doing. Don't lose your fire, someone shouts at you, and you get it now. If the flame dies, you're toast, literally and politically. There's no thermometer, no timer. Everything is done by feel, smell, sound. The cook watches you from the corner, eyes narrowed. You know what he's thinking. This one's soft. Give him until dinner. He'll run or burn. Historians still argue whether the intensity of heat work in Tudor kitchens was constant or came in bursts depending on the day's menu. But from your current position, cheeks flushed red and sleeves damp with sweat, it's clear this job doesn't stop. Ever. Your next task is rearranging the woodpile. You haul damp logs from the storeroom, stacked haphazardly in a pile that somehow smells worse than the pig. The mold is real. You sneeze 3 times, and by the third, someone calls out, "Bless you, but if you're sick, don't touch the goose." Apparently, Tudor kitchens took disease very seriously, at least when it came to their poultry. You return to the fire, which now seems bigger, angrier. You wonder if it's growing on purpose, like some elemental beast. A drop of sweat runs down your spine. You can't tell if the rising nausea is from the heat or the sight of a sheep's stomach being stuffed with oats nearby. Just when you think you might faint, someone hands you a chunk of bread. It's warm, dense. You devour it in 2 bites, unsure if it was meant for you or the dog. Too late now. You made eye contact with the mutt, and it looks betrayed. You lean against a wooden beam, eyes fluttering half closed, and think, just for a moment, about a modern kitchen. A microwave, a cold soda, ice, actual ice, not an exotic import guarded like treasure. And then someone shouts, "More wood, boy!" and you're snapped back to reality. Your arms are trembling, your shirt soaked, you smell like salt and roasted poultry, and your face is probably the color of a poached tomato. You pick up the next log. Step forward. Feed the fire. Again, the smoke never really leaves your eyes. You blink and it's still there, ghosting the edges of everything, making even the shadows seem greasy. But there's no time to complain. Someone's just dropped a bucket in front of you and said, far too cheerfully, "Time to prep the pudding bags." Pudding bags? Sounds delightful. Maybe you'll be assembling some sweet little sponge cakes, dusted with sugar and cinnamon. Ha! Nope. You're handed a sheep's stomach. It's slick, it's veiny, and it flops in your hand like a water balloon filled with secrets. Across the table, someone's already stuffing one with oatmeal, blood, chopped liver, and spices that only barely manage to distract from the smell. This, you learn, is a black pudding. Not a dessert, not even close. Welcome to Tudor delicacies. Your first job is to rinse the bladders. Yes, pigs' bladders. They're hanging in a line like party balloons from a nightmare. You dunk them one by one in a basin of water that might have been clean in a different century. Each one wobbles, gurgles, and makes a wet slap as it hits the wood. The girl next to you laughs when one bursts and sprays your apron. "There's your perfume for the day," she says. Mainstream fact. Tudor cooks used animal intestines, stomachs, and bladders as containers for cooking. Early versions of sausage casings and boiling bags. Before cling film, there was gut. You're told to mash a heap of barley and sew it into a bowl with your bare hands. You obey, plunging your fingers into the mixture. It's sticky, gritty, and somehow both cold and greasy at once. A little bit of the mix splashes onto your tunic. You try not to look down. You try not to think. While working the mixture, your partner, an older man with fingers like old roots, starts telling you about the banquet last month. "We served baked peacock," he says, still in its feathers, gilded the beak with real gold, took 2 days to prep. You glance at your own lump of mystery pudding and feel something close to despair. It doesn't even resemble food. It's more like a threat wrapped in intestines. Quirky tidbit. Tudor kitchens loved spectacle. Entire animals were sometimes reassembled and stitched back into their skins after cooking, just to be paraded out looking alive. Nothing says appetizing like a dead boar wearing its own face like a party mask. Now someone hands you what looks like a brain but turns out to be a calf's sweetbread. You are not reassured. You're told to chop it finely and mix it with herbs. Every motion makes a wet, squelching sound. This used to be inside something. Now it's your lunch prep. The master cook walks by and inspects your work. He sniffs your pudding bag, pokes the stomach twice with a knife, and mutters, "Too loose." You have no idea what that means. You smile awkwardly and nod like you'll fix it. "Try again," he adds, tossing you another bladder. You look at it. It looks at you. Neither of you are thrilled about this arrangement. Historians still argue whether the more grotesque elements of Tudor cuisine were about necessity or bravado. Was it a creative use of limited resources, or a way for nobles to prove they could afford servants willing to do anything? One thing's for sure, there's no dignity in squeezing blood pudding into a sheep's organ at 8 in the morning. The next dish involves eels, live ones. Someone dumps them on the counter like spilled spaghetti, and they start wriggling with a silent, muscular panic. You're told to calm them down before skinning them. You're not given tools, just a cloth and a look. You try. You really try, but the eel slips from your grip and lands on the floor with a splat, where it begins a slow escape under the bench. A dog barks, a cook curses, the eel wins. Meanwhile, a boy next to you is carefully assembling a marchpane sculpture, Tudor marzipan molded into the shape of a castle. You ask if you can try. He scoffs. You think you've got clean enough hands for marchpane? Point taken. You return to the pudding bags. They're bulging now, tied off with string, ready for the cauldron. You lower one in carefully. It bobs. The water bubbles. A kitchen maid warns you. Don't let it burst, or the whole pot smells like a privy. She's not joking. There's an odd satisfaction in getting one thing right. You manage not to burst any organs. You even stir the pot gently, like you've done this before. Someone tosses you a wink. Tiny victories in a world built from edible horrors. You're allowed a sip of small ale. It's barely alcoholic, more like savory tea, but it's cold, it's clean. You savor it like it's liquid heaven, and for one brief moment as the pudding simmers, you almost forget where you are. Then the scullery maid arrives with a fresh pail of guts. Right, back to work. Your hands haven't been clean in hours, and now you're learning they probably won't be for the rest of the day, or the week. The smell of pudding bags still clings to your fingers even though you've scrubbed them on hay, rubbed them in flour, and tried in desperation to dry wipe them on your apron, which is now a patchwork of kitchen crimes. But forget the smells and slime for now. It's time to understand where you stand, which is to say, at the bottom of everything. You're introduced to the hierarchy of the Tudor kitchen, and it's not just a casual ladder. It's a ruthless chain of command. You're introduced to the hierarchy of the Tudor kitchen, and it's not just a casual ladder, it's a ruthless chain of command. You're below the scullions, below the turnspit boys, arguably below the kitchen cat. That's not a joke. The cat gets scraps. You don't. The top, there's the master cook. He's got his own hat, his own desk, a ring of keys. He doesn't touch food so much as command it, gesturing at dishes like a general sending troops to war. Beneath him are the yeoman cooks, the pastry chefs, the bakers, and the pottagers. They bark orders down the line, and by the time those orders reach you, they're more like angry echoes. Your official title? You don't have one. You're just boy or oi you with the nose. Mainstream fact. Tudor kitchens ran with military precision in large households. Everyone had a defined role, from the grooms of the kitchen to the sergeants of the larder. Even the job of turning a spit was specialized. You could spend your youth rotating meat and never be promoted. You're starting to feel that reality settle deep in your bones. One of the cooks, a woman named Nan, who seems to simultaneously stir 3 pots and threaten a scullion with a ladle, tells you that if you want to earn your keep, you need to be useful. So you try. You carry trays. You fetch knives. You slice vegetables with the precision of someone terrified of being yelled at again. But no matter how hard you work, it seems someone is always sneering. The scullery maid elbows you out of the way when you block the sink. "That's my spot," she snaps. "You clean up there again and I'll put a beetle in your pudding." You apologize. She grins. "Good boy." You start to realize the pecking order isn't just enforced, it's weaponized. Everyone below tries to climb up. Everyone above tries to stay there. And you, poor soul, have somehow landed in the perfect position to be bossed by all of them. A pastry cook sneers when you try to help roll dough. "Those are meat hands," he says. "Go fondle a turnip." Quirky tidbit. In some Tudor households, different kitchens were physically separated. The pastry kitchen, the boiling house, the scullery, the larder, each its own domain with separate staff and turf wars. Step into the wrong room, and you'd better have a good excuse. Your only real companion is a spit boy named Tom. He's 9. He tells you he sleeps near the hearth to keep warm. His arms are long and wiry, built from years of cranking meat through endless rotations. "Sometimes I dream about turning," he says flatly. "Just wake up spinning." You feel a pang of sympathy. Then he steals your bread crust. Historians still argue whether the lower-ranking kitchen staff were treated poorly out of necessity or sheer habit. Some records suggest young boys were whipped for late meals. Others claim the camaraderie made up for the hard labor. Either way, your back already hurts, and no one's giving you a break. A call rings out. "Fire's low." You scramble with wood. A second call. "Who prepped this sauce? It's vinegar." A third. "Someone's been in the spice chest." That last one sends a hush across the kitchen. The spice chest is locked, always. It's where the nutmeg, cloves, and saffron are stored, stuff so valuable it's kept under literal key and guard. Stealing even a pinch could get you dismissed, or worse. The master cook emerges, face pinched. "Who touched the chest?" You shake your head. Everyone does. There's no answer. Just tension thick as lard in the air. Eventually By now, your body is staging a quiet rebellion. Your arms ache from turning spits. Your knees creak from endless trips to the firewood pile. And your nose has ceased trying to discern good smells from bad. Everything just smells brown, roasted, slightly alarming. So when someone tells you it's time to check the meat barrels, you think, finally, something straightforward. Wrong. You're taken down a few slick stone steps to what you assume is a dungeon. But no, this is the larder. It's cool here, mercifully. A small gift, but it's also dark, damp, and full of barrels. Lots and lots of barrels, each filled with meat submerged in layers of coarse salt. Salted fish, salted pork, salted beef, salted things that were probably mistakes. You pry off a lid and immediately gag. The smell is sharp, sour, with a top note of abandonment. The cook beside you nods approvingly. Means it's preserved proper. Mainstream fact. In Tudor England, Salting was the go-to method for keeping meat from rotting. With no refrigeration, salt was life. Meat could be salted, pickled, dried, or smoked, and often was kept for months, which meant by the time it hit the table, it was sometimes more chemistry experiment than cuisine. Your job: test the meat for rot. And no, not with tools, with your nose. You take a breath and lower your face to the open barrel. The scent hits like a punch. It's complex. Part sour wine, part damp dog, part panic. You retch, quietly, daintily. The cook hands you a spoon and tells you to scoop out a bit and cut it open. The meat is gray. Inside, it's a more troubling shade of gray. Bit green in it, the cook says with a shrug. Good for stewing. Historians still argue whether the average Tudor meal tasted any good at all, or whether it was simply spiced and sauced enough to trick the senses. The wealthiest households had access to fresh game and gardens. But even at court, preserved meats were common, especially in winter, when hunting was unreliable and the gardens gave up. You replace the lid, hoping the next barrel will be kinder. It's not. This one contains eels, again, salted, coiled like undead shoelaces. You touch one, and it wiggles slightly. Still twitching? The cook asks, not even looking. That's a good sign. You're not sure if he's joking. You don't ask. The fish barrels are next. Dried cod, salt cod, pickled herring, smoked herring, fish that smell like they died with secrets. You try to count them, as instructed, but lose track because your eyes are watering. The pickled herring stares at you. You stare back. You lose. Quirky tidbit: salted cod was imported in huge quantities from Newfoundland and Iceland during the Tudor era. It was a staple during religious fasting days when meat was forbidden. So, yes, you got fish, but not the fresh kind. You got fish that came in crates and looked like driftwood. Next, you're taken to a small side room, barely more than a stone alcove. This is where the pickling happens. You see jars of onions, beets, eggs, and what you think are plums. Each jar floats in a murky bath, some cloudy, others suspiciously pink. The pickler, a wiry man with permanent vinegar face, hands you a beet and tells you to slice it. You do. It bleeds red, like a scene from a very dramatic play. He nods. Pickled proper. You don't ask what the cloudy jar contains. You really don't want to know. Then comes the surprise. You're told to help prepare cock ale. You're hopeful. It sounds festive. Then they bring out the ingredient list. Ale, raisins, nutmeg, ginger, and a whole boiled rooster. Mainstream fact again. Cock ale was a real Tudor drink, essentially beer flavored with sugar, spices, and the essence of poultry. It was considered medicinal. You stir the pot slowly, watching the poor bird swirl. The smell is savory, spicy, confused. Back upstairs, the air somehow feels worse. At least the larder didn't have open flames or airborne fat. You re-enter the main kitchen with a haunted look, clutching your notes on which meats passed inspection and which should, in your humble opinion, be buried at sea. The master cook barely glances at your list. "Anything wriggling?" he asks. You nod solemnly. "The eel," he nods back. "Keep that one." You return to your corner, exhausted, faintly pickled, and reconsidering your life choices. Your fingernails smell of herring. You've got brine in places brine should never be, and you're beginning to suspect that preserved is Tudor code for edible, technically. As you lean back to rest against a barrel, carefully checked for leakage, you hear someone mutter nearby, "Lunch in an hour, if nothing's gone off." That's a big if. The smell of barley mash, yeast, and overworked humanity swirls around you as you stumble into your next assignment, the ale and bread routine. And it really is a routine. Grinding, mixing, kneading, proving, baking, pouring, skimming, sampling. Then again, and again, and again, until you lose all sense of time and possibly your fingerprints. You're handed a hand quern, a small rotary grain mill that weighs more than you, and shown how to pour dried barley into the top funnel, then grind it down to flour using sheer willpower and upper body strength you do not have. Clockwise, slow and steady, someone says. You try. You immediately go counterclockwise and spill half the grain. You're met with a sigh and the kind of look you normally reserve for people who use a fork to eat soup. Grinding barley is like trying to churn gravel into clouds. Your arms scream with each pass. After only 5 minutes, you start dreaming about elevators, escalators, even automatic pencil sharpeners. Anything but this. Mainstream fact. Most Tudor bread was made from a blend of barley and wheat, or even peas and beans. Coarser, denser, and darker than modern loaves. The whiter the bread, the more prestigious the eater. White loaves were for the elite. You? You're making the stuff that gets scraped off bowls. Eventually, your batch of flour passes inspection. It's loaded into a mixing trough where someone else, thank God, adds water, salt, and a bit of old dough to get the fermentation going. No modern yeast here, just a living, breathing lump of yesterday's bread. Your next job? Kneading. For what feels like an hour. You push and fold and press, and occasionally get corrected by a 12-year-old girl who somehow kneads better and faster than anyone else in the room. Use your weight, not your wrists, she snaps. Don't poke it like it owes you money. Once kneaded, The dough rests under a cloth that may or may not have been washed this decade. This is proving, and it's your one short window to sit. You lean on a flour sack, your fingers twitching from effort, and watch the dough rise ever so slightly, like it's teasing you. But there's no lounging in Tudor kitchens. While the dough proves, you're dragged off to help skim ale. Huge vats of it bubble in a corner, giving off the smell of warm bread mixed with horse stables. You're handed a slotted spoon and told to remove the fluff. It's foam, yeasty, sticky, and somehow alive. Quirky tidbit: Tudor ale was uncarbonated, brewed quickly, and consumed fresh. It was safer to drink than water, and often flavored with herbs like rosemary, sage, or wormwood. Everyone drank it, including children. Someone hands you a ladle and nods toward a smaller cask. Taste this one. Tell me if it's soured. You hesitate, then sip. It's warm, tangy, and tastes like soggy toast left in a barn. You gag. That means it's fine. The brewer shrugs. Historians still argue whether Tudor ale production was more domestic or industrial. Some believe most was made in-house, especially in noble kitchens. Others argue that by the 16th century, ale production had become more centralized. Regardless, you're definitely not in a modern brewery. Back at the oven, the heat is unbearable. Again, the baker opens the door, and it's like a dragon is exhaling in your face. He slaps in the risen loaves using a wooden peel, then seals the oven door with clay. No knobs, no dials, just intuition and burns. You ask how he knows when it's done. He points to a dark patch on the oven wall. When that bit stops smoking, that's it. He hands you a smaller lump of dough. Make your own. You don't eat unless you bake. You shape a wobbly oval and try to remember how to score the top like the others. It ends up looking like someone punched it. Still, it goes in with the rest. The next task is bottling ale. You fill ceramic jugs, cork them with rags, and mark the ones fit for servants versus gentry. The good stuff goes upstairs. The sour stuff, it stays with you. Someone calls out, "Bread's done," and the oven opens again. Steam erupts. You shield your face. Loaves emerge, crusty, cracked, fragrant. They smell better than you thought possible. One is tossed to you. It's yours. You break it open. The inside is chewy, still warm. A smear of dripping on top, rendered fat from the morning's roast, transforms it into something glorious. You eat silently, reverently. Even the kitchen cat eyes you jealously. Then someone points to your messy station. Clean that. Then more barley. You pause, mouth still full, and sigh. Your brief moment of victory tastes like burnt crust and satisfaction. Then the grind begins again. You're almost starting to believe you can survive this. Sure, you smell like boiled wheat and fatigue, but you've baked a passable loaf, and you're still on your feet. Then comes the spice chest. You've heard whispers about it since your first hour. The locked box, the master cook's key ring, the accusations, the drama. Now, suddenly, you're standing in front of it, a squat wooden cabinet bound in iron straps, tucked behind the master cook's desk like a miniature fortress. You are not alone. The master cook stands beside you, key in hand, brow arched. "Don't sneeze," he says, "and don't blink too hard. That's more saffron than your wages." He unlocks the chest and swings it open. Inside, small ceramic jars, tightly corked, labels in Latin and Tudor scrawl. The air around it is different, less greasy, more mysterious. You catch a whiff of clove, maybe cinnamon, maybe fear. Mainstream fact: spices in the Tudor era were both flavor and flex. Nutmeg, cinnamon, saffron, and pepper were status symbols. They came from halfway around the world and cost more than meat, sometimes more than gold by weight. A pinch of spice in a dish could signal wealth, worldliness, or reckless extravagance. You're told to measure out a quarter spoon of ginger, a sliver of mace, a thumb-sized piece of cinnamon bark. Your hands tremble. You drop a clove. It rolls under the table. You dive after it like it's the crown jewels. The master cook snorts. "You'll live. That one's old." There's a quiet reverence here. No yelling, no clattering pans. Just the gentle tap of a ceramic lid, the delicate clink of a brass spoon, the smell of a distant continent. You feel like you're handling someone else's treasure, which, in a way, you are. Then the quiet ends. A yell from across the kitchen. "Who pinched the pepper?" The room freezes. You lock eyes with a baker holding a suspiciously seasoned pie. He glares at you. You quickly raise both hands like a child in a morality play. "Not me," you mutter. Quirky tidbit: many kitchens employed a spicer or herbman whose sole job was guarding, measuring, and distributing spices. Theft was common. So common, in fact, that some households kept their spices in the same chest as silverware and under the same level of surveillance. You're allowed to prepare a spice mix for a stew. Ground ginger, mustard seed, a tiny pinch of saffron. The colors alone are hypnotic. Burnished orange, soft yellow, speckled tan. You sprinkle them carefully into a bubbling pot of venison and barley. The transformation is instant. The smell lifts. The meat softens. For a moment, the dish seems luxurious. This is why spices mattered, not just for taste, but for elevation. A spiced dish said, "I know things you don't." It said, "I've got trade connections." It whispered, "I can afford more than boiled mutton." Historians still argue whether Tudor cooks truly understood how to balance spice profiles, or if they simply used every expensive ingredient available to impress their patrons. Some recipes read more like brag sheets than culinary blueprints. Saffron, cinnamon, rosewater, sugar, all in one dish? That's not a meal. That's a parade float. You're snapped out of your reverie by the sudden arrival of a spice thief. Not a human one, just the cat, pawing at the open drawer and sneezing violently. You gently nudge her away, hoping you won't be blamed for any paw prints in the cardamom. After locking the chest, the master cook tosses you a question. Know why nutmeg's worth more than you? You hesitate. Because it's rare? He smirks. Because you can't sail a ship. And it can. You think that's a joke. Maybe. Hard to tell. You're still on edge from the clove incident. You return to the main kitchen, blinking away the spice haze, only to be accosted by a pastry boy who wants cinnamon for a batch of marchpane roses. You send him to the master cook. He groans. He only gives me half a pinch at a time, like I'm feeding pigeons. Welcome to the delicate politics of seasoning. Later, as you stir another pot, this one with a suspicious number of eyeballs floating in it, you overhear a debate about whether the Duke prefers hot, pepper, or sweet spice. No one agrees. One cook insists he hates cinnamon. Another says he likes it on beef. A third swears he once saw the Duke pour rosewater in his ale. You glance over. Are we guessing, or are there records? The pastry boy shrugs. Same thing in it. And just like that, the truth about spices becomes clear. They're part tradition, part experimentation, and part blind guesswork based on your noble's last weird request. You finish the stew. The spices lifted from wet meat experience to something you'd actually consider serving voluntarily. The master cook tastes it, nods once, and says nothing. But he doesn't spit it out either, which, in this kitchen, is the highest praise imaginable. If the spice chest was a world of delicacy and quiet awe, then the boiling station is its evil twin, loud, bubbling, and just a little bit violent. You're reassigned here with no ceremony, told only, mind the splash. And you should. One errant slosh from the cauldron, and you'll look like a peeled tomato. The boiling hearths are set back from the main flow of the kitchen, in a stone alcove that feels more like a forge than a food prep station. Thick iron pots the size of bathtubs hang over roaring fires, and inside, chaos. Soups, stews, and substances with no clear identity. Each pot is hot enough to melt your sins. You don't dare ask what's in them. You're just told to stir, keep the levels topped off, and don't let it boil dry, or you'll be the next ingredient. You laugh nervously. No one else does. Mainstream fact. Boiling was a Tudor staple. It was used for meat, fish, puddings, and even entire birds. The boiling hearths ran nearly as often as the roasting spits, because the technique was practical, relatively fast, and softened even the toughest cuts. You're given a long wooden paddle, more canoe oar than spoon, and told to stir clockwise than anti-clockwise. It helps balance the flavors, a cook mutters. You suspect it's more superstition than science, but you obey. The liquid inside is thick, brown, and chewy. Something soft brushes your wrist as you stir. You don't investigate. Next, you're told to manage 3 timings: the barley, the offal, and the rabbit stew. No timers, of course, just judgment, heat management, color, smell. Boiling isn't just about temperature, it's about trust. You try, you fail. The barley turns gluey. The offal bubbles over and leaves streaks on the hearth that hiss ominously. The rabbit stew seems fine until someone points out you forgot to skim the scum. There's now a floating foam layer that looks like someone tried to boil a dirty handkerchief. You eat with your eyes first, someone quips, scraping it off for you. You try to recover. You toss in a pinch of sage, a clove, some leeks. It helps, slightly. At least the smell is more woodsy casserole than regretful accident. Historians still argue whether Tudor kitchens had standardized techniques or simply evolved through oral tradition. The boiling process, so simple in theory, was actually a delicate dance of ingredient order, stirring rhythm, and fire control. One mistake, and a nobleman's dinner became pig feed. Meanwhile, another pot nearby is bubbling with suet pudding. It's tied in a cloth, floating like a ghost in a thermal bath. Every so often it knocks against the pot wall with a soft thunk, which somehow unnerves you more than the offal. You lean over for a better look. A nearby maid shouts, "Mind your eyebrows." You reel back. Good advice. Quirky tidbit. Tudor puddings weren't all sweet. In fact, many were savory. Minced meat, suet, blood, and oats wrapped in cloth or gut and boiled for hours. The cloth wasn't for flavor. It was just so the pudding wouldn't disintegrate entirely. You're sweating. The steam here doesn't rise gently. It attacks. Your face is wet. Your shirt is soaked. And your apron hangs heavy like a wet towel. The air is filled with so many scents, gamey, herbal, acidic, that you can't tell what's cooking or what's rotting. A boy walks past, carrying a pot of vinegar and wine reduction for some nobleman's lamb. He slips. The pot tips. A splash hits your shin. It burns, but only a little. "Oh, lucky," someone says. "It's only the acid hot one." Only. You limp back to your station and stir with one hand while cooling your leg with the other. It feels like you've aged 5 years since breakfast, and you haven't even had breakfast. Then it happens. One of the cauldrons, the big one, the terrifying one, starts bubbling too aggressively. You lean over to adjust the firewood, hoping to reduce the flame, But as you reach down, a pop sounds. Not just a pop, a wet explosion. Hot stew erupts like a culinary volcano, splattering your arm and neck with searing broth. You cry out. Several cooks whirl around. One throws you a wet rag. Another just says, "Told you not to lean in." You slap the cloth to your arm, which now looks like it's been basted. It stings, but you're breathing. No blisters. You'll live. Rite of passage, the head boiler says. Now you're one of us. You wish it came with a medal or an ointment. At the end of your shift, you sit on an overturned bucket, staring at your hands. They're red, wrinkled, and smell of onions and irony. The boiling hearth roars on behind you. More pots, more foam, more things that must never be named. You're exhausted, but somehow weirdly proud. You didn't boil dry. You didn't burst the pudding. You didn't fall in. For a Tudor kitchen, that's practically a promotion. You start the day scrubbing dried marrow off a cleaver the size of a roofing tile. You think, maybe it's a quiet task, meditative even. But then someone yells, "Rat!" and the illusion of peace dies instantly. The rat streaks past your boots like a greasy dart. It leaps a puddle of beer, knocks over a stack of trenchers, and vanishes beneath the dried herb rack like it owns the place. No one panics. No one screams. Instead, a small chorus of groans and curses rises like morning birdsong. A kitchen boy shrugs and tosses a chunk of bread into the shadows. That'll keep him out of the pastry for an hour. Welcome to Tudor Pest Control. You return to your cleaver, but now you can't stop thinking about the rat, or more specifically, how many rats? Because if there's one, there are dozens, possibly hundreds. And you've just spent the last 3 days prepping meat, pudding, and barley in this place. You eye your half-finished loaf from yesterday with sudden suspicion. Mainstream fact: Tudor kitchens were notoriously pest-ridden. Rats, mice, cockroaches, none of them strangers to the pantry or flour sacks. Cats were the first line of defense, and many noble households employed multiple to guard the stores. One such feline struts by now, portly, haughty, and clearly in charge. She sits herself next to the butter churn and glares at you as if to say, "This is my hearth now." You back away respectfully. She blinks slowly. You've been ranked. A scullery maid named Dot hands you a broom and tells you to sweep. Not just the floor, everything. The rafters, the counters, the cracks between flagstones. You set to work, dislodging bits of bread, feathers, and at one point, what appears to be a spoon, fossilized in grease. You reach the soot shelf. Yes, that's what they call it, and begin brushing clumps of black fluff into a bucket. It's a mixture of ash, smoke, and despair. You lean over to inspect one particularly thick patch and cough. Hard. The soot tastes like smoked meat and floor wax. You try to blink it out of your eyes, but it clings. You're going to be wiping black from your nose for a week. Quirky tidbit. Some Tudor kitchens used soot as a form of cleaning agent, rubbing it into pots to scour away residue. Yes, the soot from the hearth. You'd complain, but then you'd probably be forced to test it. You sweep under a table and find an alarming collection of objects: a moldy apple, two mouse bones, a spoon with no handle, and something that looks like a glove but might be part of a chicken. You bag the lot. The scullery maid nods approvingly. "You've got the eye," she says, which feels like a compliment and a warning. Then comes the actual cleaning. Water, bucket, cloth. Simple, right? Wrong. The water is cold enough to shatter dreams. It's drawn straight from the well and hasn't been warmed, because apparently hot water is for supper pots, not scullery rats. You plunge your hands in, your joints squeal. Your soul briefly exits your body. You begin scrubbing a wooden bowl. It's crusted with stew that has layers, geological layers. You chip away like an archaeologist of culinary trauma. The grease doesn't wipe, it fights. Next, you clean a roasting tray that might be older than you. The fat is congealed into a kind of medieval lacquer. You scrape, it resists. You scrub, it mocks. You accidentally fling a chunk across the room. It hits a wall with a sad, wet thunk. No one comments. Historians still argue whether Tudor kitchens truly had regular hygiene routines, or if what we consider clean today simply didn't exist back then. While certain tasks like sweeping and scouring were done, sanitation was more about visible tidiness than actual germ removal. You clean with sand. Yes, sand. Coarse, gritty, and remarkably effective at scouring pans. You rub it in with a damp cloth. Work it over the metal until it shines, or at least looks less tragic. Then rinse with a splash from your frozen hands bucket. The smell that rises from the drain is something between damp dog and boiled turnip. You try not to breathe too deeply. Suddenly, the room darkens, not metaphorically, literally. A gust of wind has blown soot from the hearth across the kitchen, mixing with the already dingy light to cast a gray pall over everything. For a brief moment, it feels like you're inside a chimney. Someone lights a candle. Another person mutters, "Don't let the Duke see this." You're told to tidy the herb rack before he arrives. You nod and climb onto a stool, sorting through bundles of thyme, rosemary, sage, and what might be dried weeds. You sneeze. The sneeze dislodges a beetle. It lands in your hair. You scream very quietly into your sleeve. Down below, the cat is watching, judging, not helping. When the light returns, it reveals your face, streaked with soot, wet from the sneeze, and wearing the unmistakable expression of a man who has seen too much time. But the kitchen does look cleaner now. A little. There's still a rat somewhere under the dresser. The cat is still sovereign, and your hands will never be warm again. Still, you survived the cleanup. You swept, scrubbed, scoured, sneezed, and somehow didn't burst into flames. In a Tudor kitchen, that counts as victory. It begins with a bell, not a gentle chime, but a deep, clanging toll from the far corridor, a sound that makes every cook stop, straighten, and mutter something that sounds suspiciously like prayer. Then the yelling starts. A steward rushes in with a scroll. "The Duke is arriving today," he barks. "Not tomorrow, not next week, today, with a retinue of 20, possibly more. No one knows, or they know and are too afraid to say it out loud." You blink. Your broom falls from your hand. The kitchen becomes a hurricane. "Pie room, double the batches. We need a swan. Who prepped the swan? Where's the marchpane centerpiece? Who took my sugar roses?" And you're pulled bodily into the pastry chamber and handed a rolling pin the size of a forearm. "You're on crust duty," someone snaps. "Try not to embarrass flour." Mainstream fact. Royal and noble visits meant full culinary theatrics. Lavish displays, enormous variety, and showpiece dishes like peacocks, venison, sugar sculptures, and pies so elaborate they were often served with live birds fluttering out of them. Yes, that really happened. You're assigned to assist with, what else? Pies. Dozens of them. Game pies, fruit pies, fish pies, mystery pies. Some will be eaten, others are purely decorative. The goal is not just to feed the Duke, but to awe him. The dough is a rough, thick pastry called a coffin. Not sweet, not flaky. It's a container, a crusted fortress. You roll it out, shape it with wooden molds, then press the sides with your knuckles like you're building edible battlements. The filling, one is pigeon, another eel. A third contains something that smells floral. You're too afraid to ask. Quirky tidbit. Tudor pie crusts were often not eaten. They were structural, designed to hold meat and gravy during baking, then discarded or given to servants afterward. A meat delivery system with medieval swagger. Someone shouts, "Where's the gold leaf?" You turn. Gold. Actual gold. It's being applied with a tiny brush to the beak of a baked peacock that's been dressed in its own feathers and propped on a platform. Its expression says, "Even I didn't sign up for this." You're told to help polish apples. You assume this is metaphorical. It isn't. You are now rubbing fruit with a cloth until it shines hard enough to reflect candlelight. They'll be stacked in a pyramid and flanked by sugar swans. "Don't bruise them," says a girl nearby. The last boy bruised one, and the butler threw it at his head. No pressure. As you polish, more chaos erupts. A batch of cream curdles. A tray of marchpane flowers collapses. Someone's dog eats half a goose. You're dispatched to help rebuild the banquet centerpiece. A scene of St. George slaying the dragon. entirely sculpted from butter. Yes, butter. You arrive to find the dragon's head on the floor, and St. George's sword now drooping from the heat. A boy is crying softly while holding a melted hoof. You step in, shape the wings, reattach the tongue, melt a bit of butter to patch the shoulder. It's like surgery if your patient was dairy-based and your gloves were non-existent. A maid whispers, if it survives until supper, we all get cake. You nod solemnly. For St. George, historians still debate whether such decorative excesses were more for the guest or the kitchen staff's bragging rights. Some records describe swans and peacocks adorned in jewels, layered pastries built like cathedrals, and roasts that included hidden pies, which included hidden birds, which included hidden insults if you were really unlucky. Back at the ovens, a row of roasts is finishing. Venison, boar, duck, and a pie big enough to sleep in. You help glaze the crust with egg wash and a feather brush, humming under your breath. You're weirdly calm now. The storm is still raging, but you've found a rhythm. Paint, shine, don't cry. Then comes the final moment. The dishes are lined on silver platters. The best pies, the finest roasts, the fruit towers, the sugar roses, the butter saint. The door opens. The steward appears. 10 minutes. Everything stills. Everyone breathes. A whisper. Hide the broken one. Another. Lift the goose. Don't drag it. And finally, smile. Even if you burn your tongue, you step back, hands coated in flour, sweat crusted on your brow, and watch as the parade of food is lifted from the tables like offerings to Olympus. The Duke won't see you, won't know your name, but he will eat that roast. He'll marvel at that pie. He may even nod at the butter dragon. And in this kitchen, that's immortality. The pie you helped glaze has made it to the banquet hall. The St. George butter sculpture is upright, if slightly cross-eyed, and the peacock is still shimmering under its armor of iridescent feathers. By all accounts, the Duke is pleased, or at least he hasn't thrown anything. That counts. But you're not celebrating. No, you're knee-deep in your next mission, crafting edible table centerpieces that are less about eating and more about messing with people. Make it clever, the yeoman cook tells you. Confuse them a bit. Nobles love that. And just like that, you're carving radishes into roses and anchoring them on top of a watermelon that's been hollowed out and stuffed with breadcrumbs and roast chestnuts. It's not meant to taste good. It's meant to look expensive and whimsical and bizarre. Mainstream fact: Tudor feasts often included subtleties, elaborate food sculptures designed to entertain, confuse, or deliver symbolic messages. Some were allegorical. Some were just weird. One recorded subtlety was a pastry castle that fired sugar cannonballs. You're shown a mold shaped like a deer. You assume it's for meat. It's not. It's for butter. Again, The deer is molded, chilled, then decorated with sugared violets and propped beside a roasted pig's head with a lemon in its mouth. Contrast, balance, chaos. Another centerpiece is a pie, but not any pie. This one is hollow. Inside, a handful of live songbirds. No one's quite sure if they'll sing or just panic when it's cut open, but either way, it'll be memorable. Quirky tidbit, that bird in a pie gag, not just a nursery rhyme. There's historical record, most famously in the court of Charles V, of pies concealing live birds as entertainment. You're told to make sure the birds have room to breathe and won't die before dessert. You briefly question your life choices. Then comes the real test, assembling a sugar sculpture of the Duke's coat of arms. A mix of sugar paste and egg white is molded and painted with edible colors made from crushed flowers, minerals, and questionable bravado. You're assigned to assist the master confectioner. He doesn't speak. He grunts. His hands move like calligraphy, steady, slow, unforgiving. He molds a lion. You're in charge of the rose. It takes you 3 tries, 2 sighs, and a minor existential crisis, but you manage something passable. Well, it's got petals, the confectioner says. Might fool someone drunk. You beam. Next, you carry a tray of jellied eggs. Yes, eggs suspended in gelatin, each one encasing a tiny sprig of mint or edible flower. They shimmer in the candlelight like cursed gemstones. Center table, you're told. Don't trip. You walk like you're balancing royal jewels. You pass a dog licking a spilled fig tart. You step over a scullion asleep in the corner. You make it. Barely. Historians still argue whether Tudor banquets were more about food or theater. The lines blur. These displays weren't always eaten. They were witnessed, admired, gossiped about. They made statements about power, wealth, and imagination. You're not just feeding a duke, you're impressing the entire court. Back in the prep room, you're told to add mischief. So you assist with the cheese hedgehog. It's a mound of soft cheese, shaped like a hedgehog, and covered in almond spikes. 2 currants for eyes. The trick? When sliced, it bleeds red wine jelly. Delightful, horrifying, very Tudor. Someone else is building a tower of sugared almonds designed to collapse when a servant lifts the wrong corner. Another fills tiny pastries with horseradish instead of honey, just for the comedy of watching a noble choke slightly before recovering with forced enthusiasm. You ask if that's wise. No one dies, says the prankster, just learns. By the end of it all, you've contributed to a feast that reads more like a stage play than a meal. Butter animals, jelly surprises, sculpted sugar flags, songs in pies, all for a single evening of applause and digestion. As the procession of dishes leaves the kitchen, you catch a glimpse of the banquet hall. Candlelight dances off silver platters. Guests laugh, gesture, murmur in delight. Somewhere, someone bites into your cheese hedgehog. Somewhere else, a bird escapes from a pie and flaps wildly through the rafters. It's a success. You, meanwhile, are elbow deep in leftover sugar paste, trying to shape a thistle while your hands stick to themselves like fly paper. You're sticky, you're exhausted, but you're part of something oddly grand. In the Tudor kitchen, ridiculous is just another word for brilliant. There's a strange silence in the kitchen now. Not peace, exactly. Just the hushed tension of too many people trying not to be blamed for something. The banquet is underway. Most of the food has left, but one of the dishes has come back, and that's never a good sign. A liver pie, one of the decorative ones, with rose petals and glazed dates, sits on the counter, rejected. You don't know why. No one does. But the master cook's scowl says everything. Someone messed up. You try to fade into the background, but he's already shouting, "Who prepped the rose topping?" A trembling baker raises a flour-dusted hand. "Who carved the liver? That was too thick." The knife boy points at a terrified assistant, who points at you. You? You didn't even look at the liver. But it's too late. You're now part of the blame chain. The master cook storms over. His face glistens with sweat and indignation. And, horrifyingly, he starts shouting at you in Latin, between the words incompetent and donkey. You think you catch a reference to spoiled anchovy paste. You try to explain. He's not listening. Mainstream fact. Kitchen hierarchies in Grand Tudor households were strict, brutal, and often bilingual. Latin wasn't uncommon for commands or scolding, especially in households tied to church or court. It was a way to assert authority and confuse the help. A garlic-flecked spittle lands on your cheek. You flinch, not because of the wet insult, but because the shouting draws everyone's attention. Suddenly, the entire kitchen is watching you get eviscerated with words. Do you know what happens when nobles eat bad liver? He bellows. You don't. But judging by his tone, it ends with someone's head on a platter. Eventually, he tires of yelling and storms off to berate a butcher for uneven ribs. You're left blinking, rattled, and reconsidering your existence. Then someone pats your shoulder. It's Nan, the toughest gristle soup stirrer. "That's not even the worst he's done," she says. "Last month, he made a boy eat spoiled cream in front of the steward, just to prove it wasn't sour." You blink. Was it? Oh, absolutely. He was sick for 2 days, but he learned. You glance around. Everyone's back to work, as if nothing happened. Just another day, another tantrum, another near miss. You're handed a tray and told to assist with clearing the first course dishes. You follow a kitchen footman through the service corridor. On the other side of the wooden hatch, the banquet hall. It's dazzling. Candlelight shimmers off gold-rimmed goblets. Nobles in embroidered silks dab at their mouths with linen. Someone laughs too loudly. A lute is playing, and on the table before them, what remains of the feast: bones, crusts, orange peels, and one upturned jelly swan. You retrieve plates and trays, stacking them in silence. Then you hear it. That lamb was cold. The words hang like smoke. You pause. A young noble, probably no older than you, is speaking to a footman, face pinched in disappointment. The crust was fine, he says, but cold meat ruins the flavor. You hold your breath. The footman nods, bows, and walks back toward the kitchen like a man approaching a lion's den. You follow with the dishes, heart pounding. Cold lamb, not your job, not your station, but now it's everyone's problem. The footman reports the complaint. The master cook mutters something unspeakable and immediately blames the carving station. The carving boy blames the scullion who left the tray near the open door. The scullion blames a breeze. Suddenly, everyone's angry about temperatures. Meat cools too fast on silver. We said don't use the short tray. You can't blame breezes. Historians still argue whether Tudor kitchens actually maintained food quality during service, or whether guests were simply used to dishes being lukewarm. With no warming cabinets and long distances between kitchen and hall, serving hot food required choreography and fast feet. You're ordered to help prepare a replacement lamb. Quickly, a smaller one, already roasted, just in case. You help brush it with glaze, dab it with fresh rosemary, and spritz it with rose water. Then, oddly, you're told to stick 2 warm stones under the serving platter. What for? To trick the hand, Nan says. Feels hot. They'll think it tastes hot. Genius. Devious. So very Tudor. You assist with the new service. No one trips. No one drops anything. The lamb arrives. This time, the noble smiles faintly. You don't hear it, but someone swears they caught the words. That's more like it. Back in the kitchen, there's no celebration, just relief. Someone bites into a leftover goose leg. Another drains a mug of ale in one gulp. You sit for a moment on a flour sack, breath shallow, hands sticky with lamb glaze. You've been screamed at in Latin, nearly blamed for cold meat, and learn that nobles can detect a 10-second delay in temperature. But you also learned about warm stones, and that might just save your neck tomorrow. You've scraped pudding from cauldrons, been yelled at in Latin, and served lukewarm lamb to a duke's delight. So when someone finally says, "Go help in the scullery," you think, finally, something simple. Oh, sweet deluded you. The scullery is not a station. It is a punishment, a purgatory, a dimension of grease and bone where hope goes to die and crockery goes to be reborn after several traumatic scrubbings. You descend the short flight of stairs to a low-ceilinged stone room. It smells like old gravy and bad decisions. The floor is slick, the walls weep with condensation. Piles of dishes are stacked like precarious monuments to overfeeding. At the center stands Dot, the scullery maid you've met before, the one who once threatened to beetle your pudding. She does not greet you. She simply hands you a bucket and a rag and gestures toward a tub that is more meat broth than water. Start with the trenchers. You peer into the stack, hundreds of them, round wooden bread plates soaked through with the drippings of roast duck, mustard, and God knows what else. The smell is something between sour ale and regret. You dunk the first one. The water goes from cloudy to chunky. Mainstream fact. Trenchers were usually made of stale bread in lower households, but in wealthier kitchens they were wooden, used, scraped clean, and reused. If they were too soaked to save, they might be fed to the poor or to pigs. You scrape with a flat-bladed knife. You rinse. You repeat. The smell now lives inside your skin. Then come the pots. Copper pans with burnt stew caked to the bottom like ancient lava flows. Iron cauldrons crusted with onion layers and fat you could skate on. Someone hands you sand, again, and a stiff brush. You scrub until your fingers blister, until your wrists scream, until your knuckles go pink and prune. Dot watches, nods. You scrub like someone who's been shouted at today. You have. Multiple times. Then she points to the bones. A new pile. Animal bones. Chicken, duck, maybe goat. Maybe not goat. You don't ask. Your job now is to separate the usable bits from the trash. Some bones will go to the stock pot. Some will be picked clean and repurposed. Some, charming thought, may become decorative. Quirky tidbit. In Tudor kitchens, nothing was wasted. Bones were boiled for stock, ground into powder for dog food, or used to polish pewter. Even marrow had value, extracted with thin scoops and served as a delicacy, or used in pie fillings. You try not to gag as you dig marrow out of a pig's femur. It oozes like warm soap. A rat scurries by your boot. You don't even flinch anymore. The scullery is hot, despite the lack of hearth. It's the kind of heat that rises from damp stone, warm water, and your own exhausted body. Your sleeves are soaked, your feet squish, you smell like 10 different stews. And then, just when you think you can't get any lower, someone wheels in the chamber pot pans. Yes, those pans, used for boiling cloths, cleaning chamber pots, laundry sometimes. You don't ask which use came first. You just hold your breath and scrub. Historians still argue whether scullery work was the lowest job in the Tudor kitchen or the most essential. Scullions were often boys or women, poorly paid and constantly at risk of burns, infection, or just plain despair. Yet without them, the whole system collapsed. You slip. Catch yourself on the edge of a basin. Slice your thumb on a chipped platter. Dot throws you a strip of cloth without comment. Wrap it. Keep scrubbing. Eventually the pile shrinks. The water is black. Your rag is pulp. And still more trays arrive. It never ends. Someone drops a cauldron beside you. It's full of what appears to be custard from 2 days ago. It quivers. You stare at it. It stares back. Then Dot taps your arm. Break time. You blink. There's a break? 5 minutes, she says. No more. You sit by the open door, if you can call it that. A hatch, really. You breathe in a draft of outside air that smells of mud and ash. It's the freshest thing you've inhaled all day. You nibble on a crust. Your hands sting. Your back is one solid ache. You're not even sure your kneecap still exists. But it's quiet. The pots are silent. The rat has wandered off. Dot even offers you half an apple. It's not much, but in the scullery it's practically a spa day. And then she says, all right, that jelly swan dish just came back. You rise, numb, damp, marrow-stained, back to the trenches. Go to the market, they said. It'll be a change of pace, they said. And now here you are, ankle deep in something questionable, being shouted at by a goose vendor whose cart smells like vinegar and poultry rebellion. The streets outside the kitchen aren't any calmer, they're just louder, wetter, and more likely to involve haggling over twitching things. Your mission? Pick up what's fresh. The list they give you is vague. Chickens, onions, leeks, eels, whatever fruit hasn't turned. You also need cloves if anyone will sell them without eyeing you like a pickpocket. And you must return with gingerbread, not for a dish, but because the master cook likes to nibble while yelling. Welcome to the Tudor market scene. The stalls are packed tight along the muddy street, flanked by timber buildings that lean in as if eavesdropping. You sidestep a puddle only to step in something worse. The smell is equal parts pig, ale, and cabbage. A child runs past holding a still squawking hen. No one chases him. Mainstream fact. Tudor markets were the heartbeat of city life. People bought their meat, produce, spices, fish, and even ready-made foods in open-air stalls. And cleanliness? Optional. Often the fishmonger stood next to the guy selling night soil for gardens. Let that sink in. First stop, the eel barrel. Yes, it's real. You find it under a striped awning where a toothless woman swirls a stick through a crate of live eels. Want 'em squirmy or sleepy, she asks. You don't know the right answer. You point at the liveliest ones. She scoops them into a sack. They writhe like regret. You pay in coin, but also with your soul. Next, onions and leeks. Easy, right? Except the onion pile is infested with flies, and the leeks have been chewed on. By what? No one knows. You sift through until you find a handful that smell more edible than fermented garden shoe. A nearby vendor tries to upsell you a cabbage, only slightly worm-bitten. You decline with a practiced grunt. Then come the chickens, live chickens. You're supposed to select them. How? By weight? Mood? Future potential? A boy about your age hands you one upside down by the legs. This one lays in fear, he says. You don't ask what that means. Quirky tidbit. Tudor households often bought chickens live, then kept them in kitchen yards until needed. Eggs were precious, but meat came when the bird stopped producing or misbehaved. You take 2 chickens. One pecks you. Hard. You name her Mildred. You don't like her. Onward to the spice merchant. He's got a tiny stall, more like a glorified shelf, lined with glazed ceramic jars. Nutmeg, pepper, ginger, cloves, all locked away behind his arms like he's guarding royal treasure. You ask for ginger and cloves. He narrows his eyes. Kitchen boy? You nod. He sneers. No saffron today. I didn't ask for saffron. He nods. You trade 2 silver pieces, and he gives you exactly enough spice to flavor 1 pie. He weighs each pinch as though gold dust. You tuck the pouch inside your tunic like a secret. Last stop, gingerbread. Easy enough. A woman is hawking dense squares from a tray dusted with honey and flecks of anise. It's thick, chewy, and vaguely medicinal. You buy 3 squares, 1 for the master cook, 1 for Nan, and 1 for you. You chew as you walk, nearly losing a molar. But it's warm, and not pickled, and that's enough. Historians still debate the consistency of Tudor market regulation. In theory, meat and produce were supposed to be inspected. But in practice, vendors sold whatever they could, and buyers just had to know how to spot trouble, or grow iron stomachs. As you make your way back, your arms full of fidgeting chickens, you pass a boy selling pies from a wooden tray. Rabbit, he shouts, or at least something that once hopped. You nearly laugh. Then Mildred pecks your chin and reminds you, this is still work. You arrive back at the kitchen soaked in sweat and whatever was in that puddle. The cook checks your sacks, nods at the onions, frowns at the chickens, too loud, and grins at the spice pouch like a thief spotting silver. You hand over the gingerbread. He takes it without thanks. Typical. But then Nan nudges your elbow. You get any extra? You break off a corner and pass it to her. She eats it in 1 bite. Bless your crusty soul. You sit for a moment on a bench, letting your shoulders slump. The eels are wriggling in the corner. The chickens are scratching at the wall, and someone's already shouting for the onions. You made it through the market without being robbed, bitten much, or publicly humiliated. In the Tudor kitchen, that counts as a raging success. You thought the kitchen was noisy before. You thought the market was loud, but nothing, and you mean nothing, compares to the barely controlled chaos of gossip hour. It begins after the midday meal, when things slow down just enough for people to lean against counters, peel something slowly, and open their mouths. You're chopping radishes badly when you hear it. Did you hear what the lady's maid said to the steward this morning? Someone gasps. A pot nearly overboils from neglect. You stop chopping. And just like that, you've entered the other function of a Tudor kitchen. Information hub, rumor mill, and unofficial court scribe's office. If walls had ears, they'd be reporting back to this kitchen. Mainstream fact. Kitchens in Tudor estates weren't just food centers. They were the household's informal nerve center. With servants moving between rooms, gossip flowed faster than wine. Secrets were sliced, stirred, and salted into every dish. Nan leans in with an eyebrow raised. Word is, the lady of the house has a new physician. Young, tall, writes poetry in Latin. Or so he says, grunts the butcher. Probably just rhymes liver with sliver and calls it art. You try not to laugh, but you can't help it. The pie boy joins in. Then the gossip turns. Stewards looking into missing flour sacks. 3, 4, someone whispers. 7, says a voice from behind a barrel. They think someone's selling to the baker in the village. You freeze. You helped carry those sacks just yesterday. You suddenly hope no one saw you near the storeroom. Quirky tidbit. Theft from noble kitchens was incredibly common, not just by staff, but sometimes encouraged by superiors. A bit of meat here, a ladle of oil there, a forgotten egg. Often it was overlooked, until it wasn't. Someone tells a story about a spit boy caught sneaking peacock feathers to sell at the tavern. They beat him with the feathers, Nan says, and then plucked his own cap for good measure. Dot, the scullery maid, adds, at least they didn't toss him in the moat. That happened to the onion thief in 41. You stop peeling for a moment. There's a moat? They all look at you. Of course there's a moat. Then someone lowers their voice to a whisper. Did you hear about the cook at Warwick Castle? Poisoned a noble by mistake, meant to sweeten a pie, used white lead. A long pause. That's not sweet, you say quietly. No, says the butcher, but it does clear up a rash. Historians still argue how much the kitchen staff actually influenced the political dramas of their households. Some believe they were mere bystanders. Others suggest that kitchen servants were some of the best informed people in the household, privy to secrets, rendezvous, and unguarded conversations between nobles and servants alike. You think about what you've heard today. The lady's flirtation, the flour theft, the poisoned pie. And it's only Tuesday. Then someone elbows you. You hear about the Duke's son? No, you say? Apparently snuck down to the kitchen last night, looking for cream tarts. Everyone nods. A crime of passion, obviously. You know what he left with? Nan smirks. You shake your head. A black eye. Got mistaken for a thief and whacked with a rolling pin. You glance around at all the rolling pins in reach. You're suddenly very glad you wear a kitchen tunic and not silk stockings. As the stew bubbles, the pies cool, and the eels settle in their bucket, the gossip continues. Murmurs, chuckles, snippets of intrigue passed like sweetmeats at a feast. Some of it's nonsense, some of it's probably true. All of it is recorded in the minds of people who know better than to repeat it outside these walls. You finish chopping the radishes, finally even, finally neat, and look up to see Nan watching you. Good hands, she says. Quiet ears. You'll go far. You nod, unsure what far means in a place where your bed is a flour sack and your best compliment is not being screamed at. Still, you've learned something important today. In the Tudor kitchen, information is as valuable as saffron and far more volatile. If there's one thing you've learned, it's that Tudor kitchens never stop moving. Even when it feels like you've hit the bottom of the barrel or the bottom of your patience, there's always something that needs doing. And today, it's the feast prep. There's a royal banquet scheduled, and the entire kitchen is working overtime to get everything perfect. Of course, no one actually says the word perfect. It's more like a series of grunts and angry whispers as everyone rushes around with purpose. A feast for the nobility means 10 times the usual workload, and you've been saddled with preparing fruit. You're not sure how it happened. One moment you were organizing the herb shelf, the next you're peeling apples, pears, and pomegranates with the precision of someone who's probably never seen a fruit peel in their life. Mainstream fact. Tudor feasts were extravagant affairs, often lasting for hours, with multiple courses that involved everything from game birds to intricate sugar confections. The goal wasn't just to feed, it was to impress, to dazzle, to overwhelm. Fruit carving was an art form used for centerpieces and to accompany the main courses. You glanced down at the apples in front of you, each one looking shinier than the last. This is your task now. Shiny. You polish them with a cloth, rub them with butter, and arrange them in ever-increasing towers of glossy perfection. The cook walks by and inspects your work. You feel the weight of his gaze, a quiet judgment that presses on you like a hot iron. Not bad, he grunts. Make sure the pears are perfect. You won't get second chances with the nobles. Your heart skips. The nobles. The very people who will sit across from you in an elaborate hall, pretending to enjoy this fruit while wearing velvet and furs, while you work behind the scenes in sweaty anonymity. They don't know who you are. They don't even care. They're here for the show. And yet, you know something they don't. You're the one who makes their world run. You're the one who gets them the right flavor, the right texture, the right mood of every dish. You with your peeling knife and your sweat-drenched tunic. The feast, that decadent illusion of luxury, is built on your tired hands. Quirky tidbit. At Tudor feasts, it wasn't just about what you ate, but how you ate it. Nobles were expected to use napkins, or towels in many cases, and wipe their hands clean of any sauce, gravy, or sticky fruit juice before touching their faces or any other food. The goal was to keep things neat for the next course. After all, nothing says royalty quite like wiping your hands on a decorative towel. The day stretches on. You peel, polish, slice, and arrange. You begin to resent every fruit you touch. Your hands are raw, your fingers covered in sticky fruit juice that never quite washes off. Still, there's a rhythm to it, a steady, relentless pull toward completion. You're almost done with the pears when the master cook appears in the doorway, his eyes wide with the unmistakable gleam of panic. You! Help with the pies, he demands, grabbing your arm and pulling you toward the oven. You've barely finished peeling. You're about to argue, but the look in his eyes silences you. There's no time for complaint. You're thrust into the world of pastry again, where the weight of tradition presses down harder than the rolling pins. Historians still argue whether Tudor kitchens had dedicated pastry chefs, or if it was just a rotation of underlings. Whichever the case, the pies were always the most dangerous part of the meal. Not because of the ingredients, but because of the complexity. One wrong move and the whole meal could collapse in a mess of broken crusts and spilled fillings. Pies were an art form, an edible sculpture, and if you didn't make them perfect, you could be called out in front of the entire court. You try to focus, rolling the dough evenly. You don't want to think about the mess you've already made. You just want it to be right. A perfect crust, golden and crisp. The filling needs to pop. The meat pies must be savory, the fruit pies tangy. Each one must stand on its own as a statement, not just of culinary ability, but of nobility. You're interrupted by the sound of a distant bell. The feast is near. You catch a glimpse of a servant passing by, carrying a platter of roasted meat. The time is upon you. The nobles will be here soon. The master cook is already yelling orders. Get that crust baked. Send that pie out to the front. And with that, your life as an anonymous kitchen worker becomes part of the larger drama. The feast, the court, the political games, all of it depends on the quiet, unnoticed hands of people like you. But for now, there's a pie to bake. There are fruits to polish. The feast may be for the elite, but the kitchen is where the heart of it all beats. And you, my friend, are right at the center of it. The sound of clattering silver fills the kitchen as trays are loaded onto servants' shoulders, ready to be marched into the banquet hall. The scent of roasted meats, sugar-laced pies, and clove-spiced wine wafts through the doorway, teasing you with the reality of the world outside. But inside this kitchen, you're trapped in a whirlwind of tasks, each one more urgent than the last. The master cook is in full command now, barking orders as though he's conducting a symphony. Roasts, pies, sauces. If it's not out in 10 minutes, it's not out at all. His voice rings like a bell, sharp and unyielding. You're whisked into the final preparation phase, garnishing the dishes. The roasted meats need their final touches of herbs. The pies need their golden sheen, their delicate flourishes. You're smoothing glaze over pastry, arranging rosemary sprigs like you're creating a work of art. It feels like every touch matters. You can't afford to fail now. Mainstream fact. Garnishing in Tudor times wasn't just for aesthetic purposes. It had symbolic significance too. Sprigs of herbs, flowers, and intricate designs on pies or roasts were meant to show off the wealth and skill of the household. The more elaborate the presentation, the higher the prestige. It was also used to make the food more fragrant and visually appealing during a banquet that could last for hours. You're working with a set of roasted partridges glistening under their herb-encrusted skin when someone calls out for the roast lamb. You grab the tray and begin garnishing it with a flourish of parsley until you realize it's missing something. The essential something, the sauce. You turn to the pot only to find the ladle is nowhere in sight. You can't serve the lamb without its jus, its sauce. You scour the counter, your eyes frantically searching for the missing utensil, time slipping away. Ladle, where's the ladle? You shout to anyone who might be listening. But no one answers. The master cook is already moving on to the next task. You grab a spoon, haphazardly scooping sauce from the pot and pouring it over the lamb. It's messy, it's not perfect, but it's good enough for now. You push the tray toward the line of servants waiting by the door. "Get this to the front!" someone yells, and with a grunt, the tray vanishes into the hall. You let out a deep breath. The first wave is done. You wipe your hands on your already ruined apron, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and triumph. For the first time today, you stand still just for a moment and catch your breath. Then, as if to remind you of the constant churn of work, a voice calls out, "More butter, quickly!" The banquet hall is still a distant dream. You're still buried under orders, under pressure, under the weight of the kitchen that never stops running. You're not finished yet. Not by a long shot. You grab a bowl and start mixing butter with herbs, preparing for the next round of garnishes. Meanwhile, the servants are already bringing empty platters back. Someone drops a tray with an audible clatter. You wince, but there's no time to intervene. A scullion rushes to pick it up, and you're back at the stove, your eyes darting between pots and pans, making sure nothing overflows, nothing burns. A noble woman's voice drifts in from the hall, loud but muffled. "Is the mutton too salty?" She raises an eyebrow at the server carrying her dish. It's overpowering. You feel a flicker of panic. Is it your fault? Did you oversalt the mutton? No, you remind yourself. You did your job. The mutton wasn't yours to season. But the fear lingers in the back of your mind. In the Tudor kitchen, you're only as good as your last dish. It's not just about the food. It's about perception. It's about making sure nothing goes wrong in a room full of high-born guests who would think nothing of sending you to the streets if they were displeased. As the next wave of orders comes flooding in, you're back to work, pulling apart a goose, mixing more herbs, stirring the sauces, checking the bread, seeing if the pies have cooled enough. Everything is moving in sync, the rhythm of the kitchen fast and unforgiving. Historians still argue about the personal lives of Tudor kitchen workers. Were they simply anonymous laborers, cogs in the royal machine? Or were they, in some ways, creators of their own legacy? After all, what is a feast without the hands that make it? The kitchen staff may not have received accolades, but without them, the court would have starved, the nobles would have gone hungry, and the grand illusions of the Tudor age would have crumbled to dust. In this moment, you feel that you are part of something greater than yourself. You're in the kitchen, the beating heart of it all. The feast is in full swing. From behind the kitchen doors, you can hear the laughter, the clinking of goblets, the occasional gasp of surprise when a bizarrely constructed dish is revealed. You stand at the back of the kitchen, trying to keep a low profile as the last of the first courses are cleared, but there's no escaping the energy. It's palpable. The air feels thick with it, like something big is happening on the other side of the door, just out of reach. You've barely finished checking the final batch of pies when one of the kitchen boys rushes in. He's panting, his face flushed. The Duke, he wants more roast partridge, quick now. You barely have time to register the request before you're already moving, grabbing a tray, grabbing a set of carving knives, heading toward the oven where the remaining partridges sit, gleaming under their golden skin. Mainstream fact: Tudor nobility loved their partridges. Small game birds like partridges, pheasants, and grouse were not just delicacies, they were an indication of a household's access to the best hunting grounds. Hunting was a privilege for the upper class, and a well-prepared roast bird symbolized a well-funded kitchen. The fire crackles as you open the oven, the heat pouring out like a blast from a furnace. You remove the tray carefully, each bird sizzling as if it too is part of the grand performance. You carve swiftly, aiming for perfect slices, each piece delicate, each slice glistening in the flickering light. But just as you begin to carve, a loud crash erupts from the far side of the kitchen. You freeze, the sound of something breaking, something large. "Spill the wine!" someone shouts. You glance up. But it's too late. The servant who was supposed to carry a tray of wine to the hall has dropped it. The floor is now a pool of crimson. You hear the faintest murmur of voices on the other side of the kitchen doors, followed by a gasp, then the heavy sound of a servant hurrying to clean up the mess. "Good God," the butcher mutters. "There's a whole quart out there, and we can't even serve a full cup of wine without it spilling." The master cook's voice cuts through the noise, sharp as a cleaver. "Get that cleaned up before the Duke notices, or we'll all be buried under it, and I want more meat ready immediately." You step back from the partridges, noticing how a few of the kitchen staff already seem on edge. The master cook's orders snap like a whip. Everyone moves with a greater sense of urgency, as though the slightest misstep could send the entire feast into chaos. You pick up the tray with the partridges, now neatly carved, and head toward the door, your heart thudding in your chest. You pass through the kitchen with your head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, just keeping your mind on the task at hand, delivering these partridges with perfection. The Duke doesn't want just partridge, he wants partridge that gleams with a golden sheen, that tastes like royalty itself. As you approach the door, someone grabs your arm. You turn, startled. It's Nan, her face suddenly serious. "Hey, you're still here," she says quietly. "Don't let him push you too hard. Remember, you're the one feeding them, not the other way around." Her words hit you like a wave. You nod, thankful for the reminder. In the chaos of the kitchen, with orders flying in from every direction, it's easy to forget that this place, this kitchen, is where it all begins. You're the one who makes it happen. Without you, the feasts, the nobility, the power, they're just an illusion. You and everyone else working in the shadows of the kitchen are the ones who make sure the illusion stays intact. You smile, grateful for Nan's presence, and nod. Then you push open the door to the grand hall. The scene hits you immediately. The noise, the light, the constant movement. Servants rush in and out, carrying trays of steaming food, wine, and ale. The guests sit at the long tables, dressed in velvet and silk, their faces a mixture of indulgence and formality. The sound of laughter, conversation, and music fills the air, while the flickering candles cast dancing shadows across the room. You move through the crowd, weaving between the servants and guests, until you reach the Duke's table. He's seated at the head, surrounded by his court, his attention momentarily fixed on the dish before him. The partridges are placed before him, and you step back, waiting for his verdict. He raises an eyebrow, looking down at the perfectly arranged dish. His eyes meet yours for a moment. There's a brief silence. Then, to your relief, he speaks. "Excellent," he says, his voice booming across the hall. "These are well done, cook. These will do." You exhale a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. And just like that, the pressure that's been building for hours suddenly evaporates. You smile, nodding to the servant beside you, and make your way back to the kitchen. The night carries on. The feasting, the drinking, the chatter, it's all part of the same grand pageantry, a performance that's been rehearsed for centuries. And you, in your quiet corner of the kitchen, are part of the cast. You're not the one who stands before the court, but you're the one who feeds it. You make sure that every dish, every bite, is perfect. And for tonight, that's enough. By the time the first course is cleared, the kitchen feels like it's been transformed. The pace has quickened, yet somehow everything is still frantic, a blur of hands, knives, and voices. The plates are being replenished, dishes being sent out, trays filled with meats, pies, and delicate desserts. The air is thick with heat and the constant movement of bodies. It's the final rush to keep the banquet moving, one course flowing seamlessly into the next. Your work, though, is far from over. A servant rushes past, trailing the scent of roasted meat. "Master Cook wants more pies, stat," he yells as he passes by. You catch a glimpse of the master cook standing by a roasting spit, waving his arms like a conductor. There's no time to lose. "Get those pies in the oven. They're not going to bake themselves," he roars at the nearest cook. You're swept into the frenzy, now part of a machine where every move feels like it could be your last. A pie is placed in front of you, already filled with apples and spices, the crust glistening like golden perfection. You grab it quickly, but just as you're about to slide it into the oven, someone knocks into you. The pie nearly slips from your hands. "Watch it," you shout, but the cook is already rushing off to some other task. You glance back at the pie, a silent prayer in your mind that it will survive. Mainstream fact. Tudor banquets were known for their intricacy and overwhelming variety. No less than 5 different courses could be served, often with multiple variations of the same dish. Pastry was a star feature. Sweet and savory pies were a staple. But pie making was not for the faint of heart. The crust had to be strong enough to hold the filling, but light enough to melt in the mouth. You slide the pie into the oven and move on to the next task, preparing another roast. A noble guest has requested roast goose, and as always, the kitchen delivers. You grab the plump bird, the skin already shiny with oil, and begin seasoning it with rosemary, garlic, and a touch of salt. As you work, your mind drifts back to the earlier moment in the hall, the Duke's praise still lingering in your ears. The Duke had looked at you, a brief moment of acknowledgement. That's what it all boils down to, doesn't it? In this kitchen, everything is done in the shadows, but sometimes the light catches you, even if it's only for a moment. And those moments, fleeting as they are worth every burnt hand, every scraped knuckle, every hour spent here. You finish with the goose, sliding it into the oven alongside the other roasts. The heat intensifies and the air feels heavy, thick with the promise of more food to come. The sound of bubbling sauces, sizzling meats, and the crackling of the fire becomes a constant rhythm in your ears. The clinking of silverware from the banquet hall is just another reminder that you are not the one they see, but you are the one who makes it all happen. A voice interrupts your thoughts. "The pies, boy. Keep an eye on the pies." It's the pastry chef. You look up and quickly nod, moving to the oven. The oven door is heavy. The heat is oppressive, like a physical wall. You carefully open it, checking the pies. They're golden, nearly done. You set the timer in your head and quickly close the door, your hands slick with sweat. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you spot a problem. There's a roast far in the back of the oven, too close to the flames. You reach for the roasting fork, but just before you can act, you hear the sound of someone running.
"Fire!" someone shouts from across the room. The kitchen erupts into a frenzy. You look over and see a kitchen boy pointing to the corner where a flame has begun to lick up from the side of the oven. It's small now, but the heat is building fast.
You grab the nearest towel and rush toward the flame. As you reach the oven, the fire flares again, the heat momentarily blinding. Without thinking, you open the oven door, your hands steady as you slide the roasting pan further back into the oven, away from the flames. A cook runs past, tossing a bucket of water onto the fire. The flame sputters out with a loud hiss, and for a moment, the room is silent, the tension hanging thick in the air. "Close call," the master cook says, his voice low. "Good thinking, lad." You nod, heart racing, as the kitchen slowly returns to its chaotic hum. You wipe your forehead, your hands trembling slightly. For a moment you stand still, letting the adrenaline fade. But the work doesn't stop. There's still more to do. The banquet isn't over. The next course is coming. The sauces need to be stirred, the pies need to be pulled out, the meats need to be carved. As you move to the next task, you can't help but think, in the grand scheme of things, a fire in the kitchen is nothing. But to the people in the hall, to the nobles feasting in their finery, it would have been a disaster. It's these small moments, these near catastrophes, that make or break a kitchen. And today you've managed to make it through. You haven't burned anything, yet. You grab a ladle and begin stirring a simmering sauce. It smells rich and savory, like everything else that's gone into this feast, everything that will make this night unforgettable, for better or worse. In this kitchen, no one will remember your name, but they'll remember the food, and sometimes that's enough. By the time the second course is cleared, you're running on autopilot. The adrenaline of the fire is still buzzing through your veins, but now there's a new kind of exhaustion creeping in, one that settles deep into your bones and makes every movement feel a little heavier. The banquet hall continues to hum with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the gentle murmur of conversation. But in the kitchen, the work never stops. The next round of dishes needs to be prepped. The next set of orders comes in. The master cook is at the head of the chaos, barking orders and moving with an energy you can't quite match. "Where's the venison? That's coming up next," he calls out, his eyes scanning the room. You quickly move to help with the venison, grabbing the sizzling roast from the oven. The smell hits you immediately, rich, gamey, with a hint of rosemary. You begin to carve, your movements quick but methodical, ensuring each slice is even, each piece of meat tender and perfectly cooked. The sounds around you blur into the background, the crackling of the fire, the clatter of pans, the soft murmur of servants hurrying by. You're almost lost in the rhythm of it all, the weight of your knife in your hand, the heat of the kitchen surrounding you, the pressure of making everything perfect. And yet, despite all the pressure, despite the sweat running down your back and the constant movement, there's something almost comforting in the chaos. It's a dance, a rhythm, a choreography of food and fire and hands moving in perfect harmony. The venison is ready. You nod to the cook beside you, and he quickly takes the tray, moving it to the front. You glance around. There's still so much to do, so many courses to finish, so many plates to prepare. You barely have time to breathe.
Pies, the last round of pies. Get them in the oven now, the pastry chef barks, sending you scrambling to the table.
The pies are heavier now, larger. Some are savory, others sweet, filled with everything from meat to fruit to sugar and spice. You line them up, carefully brushing each one with a layer of egg wash before sending them into the heat. The crusts must be golden, the fillings must be bubbling. It's the kind of task that requires patience, but here, patience is in short supply. You've learned to work fast, without second-guessing yourself, trusting the instincts that have slowly developed over the past weeks. A commotion outside the kitchen doors snaps you from your thoughts. Someone shouts, "The Duke wants his next course now." You glance at the clock. The hour is getting late. The nobles have already consumed enough food to feed a small village, and yet they want more. Always more. The master cook moves to oversee the last few details before the grand finale, the desserts. You catch a glimpse of the towering sugar sculptures, the buttered pears, the spiced tarts, all awaiting their moment on the royal table. They'll be the last things to leave this kitchen tonight, the final flourish in a night full of pageantry and decadence. You wonder for a moment what it must be like on the other side of the kitchen doors. The nobles, seated at their polished tables, wiping their lips with linen napkins, drinking sweet wine and laughing, unaware of the sweat, the stress, and the small mistakes that have been hidden in the shadows of the kitchen. You think about the faces of the cooks, the scullions, the boys turning the spits in the corners, about how their lives are woven into every dish, every bite, every course that's brought out. You know, of course, that you'll never be seen. You'll never be acknowledged in the same way. But it's a strange comfort, too, knowing that the entire feast hinges on your hands, on your work. You are part of something much bigger than yourself, even if you're tucked away in the kitchen, far from the glitz and glamour of the dining hall. The last pie is out of the oven. You cut into it carefully, checking the filling. The crust is golden. The smell is perfect. You nod to yourself, feeling the briefest flicker of pride. You did this. You helped create this. The first round of desserts is brought in. Trays of sugared figs, custard tarts, and fruit pies, all set to glisten in the soft light of the banquet hall. The final moments are here, and though your body aches, your hands are raw, and your clothes are sticky with the remnants of the day's labor, there's a strange satisfaction in knowing that everything you've done, the hours of slicing, chopping, roasting, boiling, glazing, and garnishing, has come together in this moment. The kitchen, for a moment, seems to pause. The hustle slows, the trays are cleared, the ovens are turned down, the sounds of the banquet echo faintly through the walls, but here, in the quiet of the kitchen, all that remains is the knowledge that the night's work is complete. You glance over at Nan, who's leaning against the wall with a weary smile on her face. "We did it," she says quietly. "Another one down." You nod. Another one down. The royal banquet is over. The food has been served. The kitchen is quiet again, at least for now. But the night isn't over. And neither is your work. As the last of the royal feast settles into a haze of drunken laughter and half-hearted praise, the kitchen begins to empty. The bustle fades just enough for you to notice how sore your legs are. You're still standing, still moving, but your body has begun to remind you of the hours you've spent on your feet, the weight of the tasks, and the sweat you've been wiping away all evening. The heat of the kitchen, the frantic rhythm, the constant wave of orders, everything has caught up with you. The first batch of staff leaves the kitchen, their backs bent under the weight of trays and the knowledge that the night isn't truly over. The final courses have been served, the last of the wine consumed. But in the kitchen, it's different. The mess waits, the cleanup comes, and it comes fast. You push the empty bowls aside and glance at the table, which now holds a scattered collection of used plates, discarded napkins, and leftovers no one has bothered to touch. You gather the scraps, your hands moving mechanically, and begin preparing for the tedious process of cleanup. Someone hands you a bucket of water. You dip the rag in it, then begin wiping down the counters. You scrub and rinse, until everything is once again clean. Well, as clean as it can be after such a chaotic day. The floor is mopped, the pots scrubbed, the silver polished. You work without much thought now, your mind still stuck in the whirl of the day's work, but your body eager to shut down. The master cook, who's been pacing like a lion in a cage, finally gives the nod. All right, it's done. Clean it all up, get everything ready for tomorrow. The cycle starts again. You look around. The kitchen is almost empty now, save for a few scattered figures. People who will stay to finish the cleaning. You catch Nan's eye across the room. Her expression is as weary as yours, but there's an odd satisfaction there too, the kind that comes after a job well done. She gives you a tired smile, her face softened by the fading light of the kitchen's fire. The kitchen isn't a glamorous place. It's not where anyone seeks recognition, and it's certainly not where the applause happens. But here, amid the smoke and the fire, the flour and the blood, you are part of something essential. The feast, this elaborate performance, is built on your hands, your sweat, your decisions. You know it, and even though no one in the hall will ever remember your name, you also know that they wouldn't have had their feast without you. You finish your work and step back, glancing around. The kitchen is quiet now. The fire crackles low in the hearth, the glow of embers casting a warm light on the stone walls. It's a far cry from the frantic pace earlier in the evening. Now there's a kind of peace, however brief it may be. You breathe in the stillness, feeling your muscles begin to loosen from the tension of the day. For a moment you stand there, letting the silence settle around you. The kitchen that was once full of clatter and chaos is now empty of guests and orders. The nobility is gone, the feast has ended. And yet, in this moment, you know something they don't. You are the one who made it happen. You are the one who kept everything running, even when everything felt like it might break apart. Nan comes up beside you and claps you on the back. Well, lad, that's another one done. No thanks, no glory. But I'll bet you're hungry now. You nod, your stomach finally catching up with the exhaustion in your bones. I could eat, you mutter. She laughs, handing you a small hunk of bread. That's all we get, but it'll do for tonight. There's a whole kitchen full of dishes to sort tomorrow. You take the bread, breaking off a piece and chewing slowly. You don't mind, because right now that's all that matters. The work, the kitchen, the food. The knowledge that for all the clattering noise, for all the chaos, you're part of something that keeps moving, that keeps feeding, that never truly stops. Tonight, you're just one cog in the machine. But tomorrow you'll do it all again, and you'll do it better. The fire flickers low as the last few cooks finish their tasks, their shadows stretching across the stone walls. The night is calm now, the frenzy of the banquet a distant memory. You finish the last of the bread, and with a deep sigh you head for the door. The kitchen will be ready for tomorrow. And so will you.